I mean, get a headache periodically, but we've just taken good care of ourselves and the machine, the equipment. Let the equipment do the heavy stuff and the repetitive stuff. Even if it takes a little longer, then, there's no downtime trying to heal. Just let the machines do the work.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast, a regular discussion with building industry professionals. Today I'm joined by Tim Uhler, framer and builder in the Pacific Northwest. You can find the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can ask questions and leave feedback there too. Tim Uhler, it is a pleasure to have you on the show. You are my favorite framer in the world, I'm pretty sure.
Well, I appreciate that. I'd like to say I'm my wife's favorite framer too. If she had one.
So how are you guys doing out there in Northwest Oregon?
We're doing pretty good. Washington. Yeah, we're just across the water from Seattle. Yeah. We're all doing pretty good. Everybody's been safe. The COVID thing is a little bit more local than it was for most of this year. The numbers are going up recently, but beyond that, we've been really fortunate. Nobody in the family. We're able to keep working. So,
do you guys have to separate on the job site with your subs and yourselves to maintain some distance?
Technically, yes. And so what we've done, since it's just three of us on site when we're framing and siding, that's not so hard. And then what Brian's doing is just scheduling the subs. So instead of putting everybody together, it's one after the other, and that way they can do their thing with nobody else around.
Have you guys had trouble getting material?
We so we only have an hour for this, right? So right when this thing started, we thought Washington was one of the only states that did not consider construction essential. We thought it was. And so what we did is I ordered in all of the lumber for the next house all at once, and it showed up the day before we were shut down. And so that wasn't fun to use that lumber once we got into the summer. But
so you just put it outside, or did you put it in a building? How'd that work?
We kept it all banded together on that site. And then we just checked on it here and there because we were basically locked down for all of March and most of, maybe it was April and most of May. But anyway, so we didn't experience the shortage because we pre-bought thinking that we could just work through. And we thought, well, if the lumberyard gets shortages, it won't matter for us we had our siding package, everything. And we didn't use any of it till June. So we didn't see any of that because
you planned ahead.
Yeah. And it just, this has been a weird year. A lot of us on the crew we felt out of sync the whole year because you're not working and then we were working part-time and then you're trying to, anyway. So the shortages are real, but we haven't had any supply problems. It just means that the lumberyard had to check with 2 or 3 other suppliers to order what they needed.
I've heard stone countertops are a problem as an example. Have you had difficulty with stone imported for countertops?
No, but Brian had trouble getting the bath fans. We actually had a house that we had to leave off the drywall in 2 bathrooms just to keep the house moving forward. And the inspector's like, well, I can't really sign off HVAC. And it's like, it's all back ordered.
Yeah.
And then windows, that was one thing for us that was almost 2 months out. So it's not that you can't get them. It's just that you got to wait a little longer.
Can you tell me a little bit about your family business? I know it was started by your dad. And did you have an interest in going to his projects and in carpentry generally as a youngster?
Yeah. We've got all kinds of pictures. I used to ride around with him and just I'd find a hammer and nails and just nail all the scrap together. So yeah, he started in 1978. I was born in 77, so I was just a little kid when he started the business. And as much as I could, I was always on site. In fact, when I think I was 12, I think it was the summer of 6th grade, I spent the whole summer on site. And, hand nailing studs, it was 2x4 construction, doing cleanup. I thought it was the coolest thing to trowel concrete, when they poured footings.
Yeah.
And just be there with the guys. I thought it was so cool.
And he let you really help, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah. But I don't know that we would do anything like that now. But in the late 80s, then we didn't have all the safety rules that we have now. So we got away with quite a bit.
Did you get hurt when you were?
I loved it. No. I used to sit on the bulldozer, our excavator. We called him Wolfman. His last name is Wolf. And he had just operated that thing so fast that I would be scared. But I used to sit on it and hang on as he was blading off the property and stay out there late at night when we'd watch Fire Watch, roast marshmallows. It was really fun.
Your your dad's business was a second career for him, right? He started a business after working for other builders. Is that true?
Yeah. He came. So they grew up in North Dakota, and he got his degree in accounting or finance, and he did his year and a half in Vietnam, and while he was in Saigon, he managed rents, and so he did kind of the business side. And when they moved out here, when he got back, he was just going to go to work as an accountant for the bank, but they weren't hiring, so he hired on with a local production builder, who eventually went out of business, and he could kind of see the writing on the wall. So.
And how many years have you and your brother been part of the family business?
That's always a tough one to ask or to answer, because I think for me, since as long as I could remember, Brian, he took some accounting out of high school. So let's just round up and say like mid to late 90s. So, 25 years roughly.
Our first introduction was at the JLC forums, and you were a very young carpenter asking those experienced guys for help, and I guess that's close to 20 years ago now, right? And I think they would describe you as an enthusiastic learner. What made you want to be a framer, and what made you want to be a roof cutter, and what made you want to ask these old crusty guys about how to be a better carpenter?
Let's see, the first part of that question, I would say it was probably the guys that Dad had working for him. He when he first started in the late 70s, the market was so bad that he worked as a laborer and he hired a lead carpenter. And so I would see and hear these stories about those guys having a ball framing. And then when I was old enough to spend spring break, it's like, I still remember 8th grade. I think it was an Aerosmith album came out, and it just played nonstop the whole week. And at the end of the day, you'd have to jumpstart the truck because the battery was dead. And I thought it was so cool just to be one of the guys. So I don't know if it was really the framing as much as the camaraderie. And then, at a certain point, they just overlap so much. But as far as asking the guys questions, I think it's just because Dad always set a good example of learn from other people. There's if somebody else has already gone through the growing pains or the difficulty, then why should we have to go through it? Like, learn from others' experience, right? And so that's what it was on the forums, because I read JLC. Dad subscribed in the 90s. I remember reading tool reviews. And so it was just trying to find new or different ways of doing things.
I remember those guys being very helpful, and I remember you asking good questions, which I think delighted them, right?
They were... For a lot of people in the trades who kind of, at least in the past, would kind of almost guard their knowledge, these guys didn't. And so you had guys from Massachusetts, New Mexico, some Canadian guys. There was an old crusty guy from Michigan. He really rubbed people the wrong way at first until you got used to him. But he was the guy with like an old beat up crane on site that really kind of did the prefab thing on site and would post pictures. And so it was more, those guys just kind of opened my mind that there were things you could do that we had never seen done before.
And do you think modern media, right? You and I have both seen huge changes in this. Do you think that could have happened, a decade prior?
No, I don't think so. The forum, I found JLC forum, I think, like when I first got on the internet, I was looking for like Guitar World magazine, looking for songs to learn how to play and on dial-up. And so with JLC, it was like, oh, the magazine says it has a website. I wonder what's on the website. And then it was just finding the forums, and it was like, oh, there's a framing forum. I didn't know what a forum was. I don't know that I've ever been part of a forum that wasn't Fine Homebuilding or JLC, to be honest. I think that's how it was. And
I think I can say the same.
Yeah, and all these guys, there was a guy from Texas, John Kirkpatrick, who started posting, and these guys were building on-site circular stairs, rough stairs, and it was like, and groin vaults, and it was like, all of a sudden, it was like, there's all this cool stuff out there. And people are willing to share. And I think what it was is all of us of a similar mind. And it doesn't matter what it is, right? It could be guitars, it could be grilling, whatever. You find that community of like mind, and then you kind of feed off of each other. So that was just fortunate. It was the perfect time to land there.
I think you'd agree that to be a successful home builder, you need to have good subcontractors. How do you develop good relationships with good subs?
Man, I don't know, because I'm not really on the business side so much. I know growing up, Dad had the same subs for pretty much as long as I could remember. So it must have just been the way that he treated them. I know one thing he's always said: pay on time.
Yeah.
Because if scheduling is tough, they're going to show up to the person they know will pay them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big part of it. But like our electrician, Stan, for years, I mean, I think he came to my wedding, our HVAC guy, our plumber. I mean, we really were like a family. So it's got to just have started with the way Dad ran things.
And you've used the same subs ever since your dad started the business. Is that true?
Pretty much. As some of those guys are retired now, it's like I didn't think I would get old enough to see them retire, but here we are. So we're still using the same HVAC sub, but he's got his son in training.
Mm-hmm.
So he's over the next 5 years, he's going to retire. And then our electrician is Brian's and my age. We kind of grew up with Jim. And the plumber is similar age. So, but I don't see any reason why it won't just keep going. Everybody knows everybody at this point.
Do you guys do your own excavation? You most of your homes are on crawl spaces, right?
Yeah. If you've watched my Instagram stories over the last week, that's what we've been doing, is clearing the lot. We bought a excavator at the end of last year. The dirt guys are so expensive and in such demand that scheduling has been tough. And so we've got enough equipment now that we can do it if we need to. But I told Brian today, I was like, I think this site, I only have about 50 hours in an excavator. So that's not very much. And so it's enough that we can do it. I mean, I can operate.
It just takes you longer, right?
It just takes longer.
Yeah.
And when you look to the right and you go left, you just have to kind of get used to still learning the mechanics of it. But I called him today and I was like, I think it'd be better if Daryl's guys come in. So I think we'll be able to get on their schedule. So it's a little bit of both right now. I think we'll probably do the backfill. We took the trees down and cleared out the brush. Then they'll come in and do what they're really good at.
And do you do your own foundations, or is that a subcontractor too?
We do them. And same thing. We do them. We always did. But when we got super busy, about 15 years ago, we were able to hire a sub to stay out ahead of us. So the flat work we're hiring out because we're just really not very good at it. We'll do it if we have to.
Yeah,
but it's very stressful. Like we hate it.
And you need someone who's good at that, right?
Yeah, there's little things like a little back patio. We could do exposed aggregate, and that's pretty simple. But driveways and things like that, yeah, hire the professionals.
That can go really wrong, right?
Yeah.
You were talking briefly just a little bit ago about your excavator. I know you've used all-terrain telehandler forklifts for years now. Can you tell me about what led to those purchases? Because those machines are very expensive, and I'm sure you did a metric on whether it makes sense or not.
Yeah, so I think that's Dad always invested in the company. So where you see like some guys, they sell their first house and they run out and buy the big truck to drive around. He drove like little Toyotas. I mean, even now what is he driving? A CRV? He had a RAV4 there for a long time. He's not the guy that goes and buys the Beamer or the BMW. It's like put the money back in the business. So it was his idea to do the forklift, and he had kicked the idea around for a couple of years. And we were like, well, I don't know, maybe not. We didn't have any experience with them, and so he bought this old. It was a Badger Dynamics. It was a 1978 Badger Dynamics. And it took 3 mechanics to trace the lineage. Ultimately, that company became Gell, which probably has been bought out. But it had this old Dodge motor that was known for backfiring, so it would shoot flames, and we'd have to start it with ether. It was awful. But the first week we had, and it had no brakes. It had an e-brake, but it didn't have any brakes. So we learned how to drive on real slow and be able to stop. But that first job that we used it on, we just couldn't believe how much. On the second floor, when you can boom your I-joists up, and you're not dragging them around the yard. So I think we had that for about a year before we bought the little forklift that we have now. Right, that was back in fall of 2003, when we just kind of coming out of that recession, and there was the Bush tax plan that had all the capital investment. It basically made it a no-brainer.
So what?
And all of a sudden we had a diesel forklift that didn't need tons and tons of fuel every week.
What machine did you end up buying, Tim?
It's an Ingersoll Rand VR90. And then about 3 years later, we bought the Ingersoll Rand 1056. And the first one, we went down and looked at it, and it seemed to have a good reputation. Ingersoll Rand's since been bought out by Skyjack. But then there was a guy on Fine Homebuilding forums, Frenchie, from Minnesota, who was a forklift salesman. And so I could message him, and he gave me all kinds of information. And that 1056 has really been, they've both been bulletproof. I mean, oil changes, and we just had the brakes worked on the big one, but we've almost not had to do anything to those machines besides change fluids and just the basic PM.
Well, what would you tell someone who's considering a heavy equipment purchase? Like, how do you know if it makes sense? And do you buy new? Do you buy used? Like, how do you find the good brands? And there's a lot to it, right?
There is, and I don't know how to answer that now because our mechanic, he worked for the company that we bought the truck from, or the forklift. And then he's been out on his own since the crash back in 2008. And so he's done basically all the maintenance on both vehicles. I mean, Don's been working with us for, and that's insane, 17 years. Boy, they tell you time flies, and it sure does. It's crazy to think about that. So Ingersoll Rand's since been bought out by Skyjack. And so the same model, basic model of our bigger forklift, Don says he's hearing that they've replaced parts a little more quickly. So it's a 2002 model. And I think it was like 2008 or something, like parts changed, and now they wear out a little quicker. So I feel like, I don't know that the short answer to that. Dad's always tried to buy new whenever possible, because if you have any downtime, that's money coming out of your pocket. And especially if you're working on it, it's like, instead of building the house to sell, you're now doing this thing over here. So reliability was always huge. If you've been the only operator and you take good care of it, you're not going to have any downtime.
These things are made to last a decade or more, right?
Easily. Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll see them in service. Well, here's one piece of advice Frenchie said: never buy one from a mason, the block guys. Because
they're lifting heavy stuff all the time.
Yeah, they run them hard. So he says, if you see grout on them, just move on. Don't buy those.
I think you just saved some people some money in this conversation already.
It's worth it. Two different guys, Mark Parley, who was on the forums and he was writing for JLC. He had one. He was a framer, and he said when he did all of his cost analysis, it basically cost a year what a minimum wage employee would cost. The difference was they were always on time as long as you kept them fed.
and it can lift way higher, right?
Oh, way higher, yeah. So I've had a couple people tell me that when they've done the cost. And honestly, we could probably sell, especially the little one. When we bought it, I think it's a 98 model, but we got it in 03. It probably hasn't depreciated much, where you could still get almost half of what we put into it, but we've had it for 17 years. So,
and it's made you money the whole time.
Yeah. And it saved our bodies. That's the big thing.
That brings me to a question in a little bit, but I was going to ask you, what advice would you give someone contemplating a career as a framer? And it's not really fair to call you a framer because you're a home builder, but I know that's your love and area of greatest expertise. What would you tell someone who is thinking about being a framer?
Honestly, I get that question quite a bit on Instagram. And I always tell people, become a plumber. There's no money in framing. It's just lots of hard work. I'm reading Will Holliday's book, and he looks back and says he should have bought a forklift when he was younger because of the surgeries and the back problems he's had. So for me, I love it, but I don't think I would recommend it to my kids or my nephews or my close friends.
Because of the toll it takes on your body, Tim?
Yeah, and I'm fortunate because, like you said, we're working for basically a general contractor. So we'll do framing. For the last week, I've been in an excavator. I mean, sometimes we're running chainsaws, sometimes we're siding, and so I feel like it's more like a cross training than it is one trade specific. But if you had to go, framers don't make anything. So at least in our area, I know some, depending on if you're working on custom homes and things like that, but you're competing with people who work real cheap.
Yeah, I totally see where your point there. How do you think people should learn their trade craft? Would you tell folks to go to a trade school or technical school, or would you tell them to get paired up with a good tradesperson of their chosen craft?
I don't know. I don't know that I'm qualified because I didn't do the schooling part per se. For all my schooling was like JLC and Fine Homebuilding. But talking to a lot of people from Australia and Canada, it seems like the programs have a lot of value, and there's some good schools on the East Coast, and there's one in Colorado that one of the teachers will direct message me, and it seems like they've got a good thing going. I don't know that there's anything like that in my area.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of, if you could find that person who's just going to mentor you, I feel like that has so much value.
Do you think there's a risk for someone willing to mentor a young person or someone new to the trades that they're going to teach them something and all of a sudden they're going to go to a competitor or be the competitor themselves?
Probably. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's such a shortage in the trades right now that if you trained up somebody really well, I guess you just need to be in a position to make it worth their while to stay with you. I know our Finnish carpenter, the young guy that he's got working with him, he's got a plan in place that each year he gets a higher percentage of the business and their partners. And so it's kind of a plan, and he's bought in. I mean, those guys, they work really well together, and I don't think the younger guy's going anywhere. He likes who he's working with, and he's invested.
I think that's wise to have some kind of, expectations on both sides and reward for doing a good job and sticking together. It benefits everyone, right?
It has for us. I mean, we've typically kept people until they had to move or something circumstantially came up. But, we'll have people that will work for us for years and years and years at a time. So, I don't have the, it's not a one size fits all. It seems like each person's got to kind of carry their own load with that one. But
do your subs have helpers and folks who are learning the craft who are sharp and sticking around?
It seems like it. I know the electrician, his guys have been with him for quite a while. The HVAC guy, he's had his guys for a long time. I would say there's a lot of turnover in roofing, and the insulation contractor for, obvious reasons. Those are tough jobs.
Yeah. I would turn as quick as I could to something else. Do you have aches and pains related to your craft? And what would you tell someone who's starting out to how should they protect themselves?
Yeah, so a lot of the guys when I was growing up, they did. They had like the chronic wrist injury or the back injury. So that was always like front and center. I have no injuries. I'm 43. So like the elbows can get a little sore if we're using a shovel, which I'm just like, well, that's a good excuse not to use a shovel. But nothing that's debilitating or even like sitting here talking to you guys. I don't have, get a headache periodically, but we've just taken good care of ourselves. And the machine, the equipment, let the equipment do the heavy stuff and the repetitive stuff. Even if it takes a little longer, then, there's no downtime trying to heal. Just let the machines do the work.
What would you tell someone who was working for, a boss who was all about fast and efficiency and carry that, don't waste the time getting the machine? Like, do you stand up for yourselves? Do you find a new boss? What do you do?
Yeah, both. I know. So when we were in Vegas for the Builder Show 2 years ago, there's a young woman in Canada, Renee Talame, really nice. But she's telling me, like, if you don't carry X number of studs on her job site, you're not going to last. And I was like, Renee, I'm carrying half as many studs as you are. But it wouldn't, make fun of me all day. That's what the old guys taught me. Make the extra trip. Don't try to do it all in one trip. If you're carrying sheeting, don't carry two at a time, even if you can. Just, it's the long game. It's not just that moment. But I don't know if you're on one of those crews where you've got that guy really cracking the whip. I think you just got to mentally plan that you're going to have to move on because it's your body.
And I think you'd agree, like, it's your most important tool for doing your job. If you destroy it, then what are you going to do, right?
Yeah.
All right, this brings me to my favorite part of this whole show. Can you tell me about your own house? And do you have any lingering problems that you're ignoring either happily or unhappily? So
if my wife was here, Patrick, this I guess would be like quite ironic. Is here we build houses, and I loathe putting things together. I don't want to work around the house. So I actually rent We built this house back in 2002. And so it really is coming up on things that need to be fixed. Like I had to replace a window that, we didn't flash anything properly back in the early 2000s. I think Vicor was our only material. No one knew how to use it properly. There was compatibility issues with the caulking. We didn't know any of that stuff. So the back side of the house, that window leaked, and we had a very small amount of damage, which was good. But I look, every time I pull into this house, I'm like, there is so much to do here. And I always tell my wife, if there was a forest fire like we've seen in the Northwest in California, I don't know that I would miss anything in the house. Anything that's important is backed up to the cloud. Yep. And sometimes I look at what we need to either maintain, fix, replace, or just clean up. And I'm like,
a brush fire wouldn't be terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, there's nothing really that's unfinished that I can think of, but as soon as there is something, it'll take me a long time to get it done, because that's just not my thing.
Do you have aspirations to build your dream house or your retirement home? No, not at all.
No. Nikki and I have just tried to keep things as simple as possible and be pretty flexible for whatever. We like to do volunteer work. And so as we get older, it's just like, well, we could go to another country and do that. We could move across the state or this country. It's just like keeping things pretty uncluttered and simple. I don't know if we talked about that in Vegas or not, but it is like with the pandemic this year, not having a ton of mental clutter. Like we try to live as debt-free as possible. The company does, the family does, the employees do. And then if we have to shut down, or like last winter, we really grinded it out through the bad weather. This year we won't, because it really took its toll. And it's just like, is everybody in a position? Are we making decent purchases that we don't have to go out there and potentially hurt ourselves because we're trying to pay things off? So I don't have any aspirations on it. My dream house would be, the dimensions would work perfectly for the sheathing, and it would be a box, and it would be like a 312 roof, and it would be 10 feet tall so that I never had to really get on a ladder to fix anything. It would be all about simplicity.
I live in a house about that height now, man, and I got to tell you, it's pretty awesome to be able to clean the gutters from my 16-foot step ladder. And I think carpenters get that, right? And if something needs repaired, it's not 30 feet up in the air.
It's true. That's one thing. Years ago, we were going to do this custom, and she worked at MCI WorldCom, and it was going to be like $1 million house back in the, late 90s, early 2000s. And we thought this is going to be like a feather in the cap type of thing. And then we just decided we don't need the complication that comes with that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, MCI went bust. She lost her stock options, and it didn't happen anyway. But it was just like, who cares? Who cares? My self-worth is not tied to, I'm a framer, and I work in the rain, and I work in the mud, and I don't care. I don't care what other people think. It's just, life is a whole lot simpler when you're not trying to impress the person next door or the other person on Instagram. Or it's like Kyle and I, my coworker, we're always just like, can we just build everything low to the ground, 412, a box? This does not need to be a feather in our cap. This is just, because they're fun too. It's fun when it's simple.
Yeah. It goes fast. You know exactly what you're doing every step of the way, right?
Yeah.
You guys probably don't have to talk about much at this point in your relationship, I bet. Not
usually. Now that we've got a new guy that we're training, there's a little more talking, but it's not, we don't really have to figure that much out. It's, in fact, if he's gone and it's me with somebody new, you realize what you've been taking for granted, that you can just, like, when it's the two of us, we both are just like, it's vacation. This is so easy. I don't have to communicate. If I say you pull left or right, it's cut right. And it's a luxury.
I can immediately tell a crew that works together well a lot is they don't talk much about the work they're doing. They talk about other stuff, of course, but it's not about the work.
Yeah.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Tim. Thank you for being on the show. Is there anything you want to ask or tell our listeners while you're here still?
I've been on a couple podcasts where they say that, and it's like, no,
I'm done. Good.
Yeah. There's if you follow me on Instagram, you'll pretty much know everything probably any given day.
Well, you have to give the handle, man.
Oh, and I'm so embarrassed by this. So it was a joke. So the handle on Instagram is Awesome Framers. And it started with Kyle and me doing dumb things that we thought some of our friends would laugh at. And it would be like just those normal things that happen on every crew.
So the awesome part was tongue in cheek.
And yeah, Kyle was like, man, what should it be? And Kyle's like, call it Awesome Framers. Let's make it ironic. So now that it's taken off, it's like, oh man. At least it's easy to remember, but it's always a little embarrassing because like there's nothing we do that's awesome. Like, usually quite the opposite. But
I think that you're doing it is awesome and that you're healthy and you guys seem to enjoy it and you're comfortable in your own skin. Like, what's not to like, man?
I appreciate that. Yeah. It's it's a means to an end. And we're just fortunate. Like the last week, my brother-in-law's been working with us. He does all of our odds and ends, and he's super laid back. And so it's Kyle, Shane, Greg, and me. And we're running chainsaws. We're running the excavator. We're felling trees. Don't tell anybody. This was the first time we've done it. So we're watching videos on YouTube at night. And it's just
there's more to it than it looks, right?
Yeah. Oh, man, there's a lot. We're like, this is what the Humboldt cut is. You want to leave 10% hinge wood. These are expressions I didn't know a week ago. And we're just having a ball. And it's just like, oh, man, we're so fortunate, even during this pandemic and everything else. It's like, yeah, you're working hard and maybe you ache a little bit at home when you get home. But still, I don't know. I wouldn't change it. It sure is commuting, that's for sure. It's at the end of the desk.
Amen. Tim, it's been great talking to you. It really has, and I'm grateful for your time, and thanks.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. It always goes by so fast talking to you.
It's fun, right?
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Tim Uhler for joining us, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Thank you very much for listening. Thanks to Tim and Jeff for joining me. Keep craft alive.